Chapter 19. Snakes and Ladders. Stop messing around. Sam tried not to sigh when Joe materialized on the rickety lookout post. We're never going to finish at this rate. I'm not. The boy slumped against the tree. I'm exhausted. Didn't sleep a wink. He fidgeted all night, huffing, puffing, and scratching. Yeah, Sam turned to Fedor. What was up with you? First you were late to supper, then all that thrashing about in your sleep. Is it hygiene issues? Fedor scowled, ignoring the smirk tugging the corners of Veronique's mouth. You should know, he lied. One of you put blasted itching cream on the soap. Sam burst out laughing. What? Well, it wasn't me. Brilliant, though. Wish I'd have thought of it. Joe looked worried. It certainly wasn't me, so don't get any funny ideas. Veronique did her best to look disinterested. Boys, do you ever grow up? She disappeared before anyone could see the mischievous glint in her eyes. Nicky the Victorious. Right, Sam chuckled. Let's get on. As the morning progressed, Joe watched his friends vanish and disappear all over the valley. He squinted at his current destination. The sun hit his glasses and obscured his view, but he was impatient not to fall behind the others, so he formed the image as best he could and created the fold. He landed on the platform and sighed, looking ahead for the next one. It was not there. He turned to look for the platform he had just left, but couldn't see that either. Oh, FFS. Joe indulged in a long and colourful tirade. He walked around the tree and was both surprised and relieved to find a rope bridge. He must have folded to the wrong place. A thought occurred to him. Why would a rope bridge lead to a platform that didn't go anywhere? He walked around the tree again. Nothing. Maybe it was unfinished, but neither the platform nor bridge looked new. He leant against the trunk, and, to his surprise, a knot in the bark gave way, sinking into the tree. Joe heard a faint click, and was amazed to see a segment of wood swing open. He crept forward and peered through the crack. The air smelt artificial, conditioned. He deployed an exploratory finger and encountered cool metal. Joe took a deep breath and slipped through the mysterious portal. He can't be that far behind. Sam tried to dismiss Veronique's concerns, whilst they sat in the shade waiting for Joe. What if he's fallen and is tangled in the branches, or worse yet, on the ground with broken bones? Who knows what creatures could be crawling all over him, biting him? Okay. Sam stood. We'll go look for him. How many platforms back was it? 3? She sounded unsure. 4, Fedor said. Come on then. Sam tried not to imagine the worst, and folded. This is it, Veronique said when they'd retraced their jumps to the 4th platform. I peeled this bark while Fedor was whining about the soap. I was not whining. Were to. Was not enough. Sam was starting to worry. He'd expected to find Joe here, bleating about being tired. He's not here, and he's not over there on the 5th. Which just leaves down there. Veronique pointed to the dark jungle floor. Sam barked a laugh. You want to go down there? No. Her eyes were hard. But he's our friend, and he didn't let us down in that stupid cave, did he? Sam felt ashamed. No, he didn't. Fedor was looking over the edge. Here. He stepped back and raised his knee to his chest, then brought his foot down, shattering one of the aging floorboards near the trunk. Whoa! Sam leapt back and grabbed the branch above him as Fedor broke another plank. What the hell are you doing? There are 2 ways down. He exposed the branch below. Falling is one. This is the other. He slid his legs through the hole. So, are you falling or climbing? Veronique was also clinging to the tree for dear life. Climbing sounds good. Nicky the koala. Veronique slipped twice. She abandoned her sandals to gain better purchase on the lichen-encrusted limbs. The sunlight faded with every branch, and by the time they dropped onto the spongy jungle floor, the landscape resembled an alien planet. Sam felt uneasy, but hated the idea of Joe being alone or hurt down there. How could he let this happen? This was all my fault. If only I hadn't been so hard on him. "Joe!" Veronique called, cupping her hands. "Joe!" "Split up," Fedor suggested, though he did not look pleased at the prospect. "It'd make sense," Sam agreed, "but then we run the risk of getting lost altogether. We could fold back to Ortega's deck. I'm pretty sure I remember it well enough." Sam nodded. "True. Veronique, do you remember it?" "I think so, but why don't we just do that now and get help?" Sam shook his head. "And then how do we get back here? Besides, this could just be another evil test. If he's hurt, we may not have the time, even with Jenny's tracker node things." "I'll go this way. Fedor, you look over there. V, you carry on that way. If you find him, scream your head off. If you get into trouble, well, same goes, okay?" They nodded. "Good luck." Sam tried to sound reassuring. "And pray we don't find anything but Joe," he muttered, pushing a large damp leaf aside. The door clicked closed behind Joe. There was a faint hum, and a line of electric lines along the wall pinged to life, bathing him in an eerie blue glow. He stood on a small metal landing of a spiral staircase winding down into the hollow of the tree. Down he went. The air conditioning, refreshing at first, became uncomfortably cold, and Joe hugged his arms to his chest. The staircase ended at a chamber with a circular carving in the floor. A mechanical voice asked. Joe jumped, his heart leaping into his throat. He could see no speaker, nor was there a console. Joe combed every inch of the room, squinting in the inky blue gloom, whilst the voice kept repeating the same question over and over. "Is this what being around me is like?" he muttered sourly. Joe walked back up the staircase to get a clearer look at the pattern on the floor, hoping he'd recognize something to give him a clue. But both the markings and their arrangement were entirely foreign. "We're in South America. It must respond to either Spanish or Portuguese." "Hola!" Nothing. Stupid. Hello is not the answer to the question. Sounds like it's asking a question. He tried again. "Lo siento, no entiendo. Otra vez, por favor." "Destinación, por favor," the voice replied. Joe was exultant when the computer asked him for his destination. He tried the Spanish for options. It worked, and the voice began rattling off a list of words, too fast for Joe to process, and so he latched onto the first one he recognized. "Mineria." He repeated the word, wondering what on earth they could be mining, then stumbled as the circular carving suddenly slid into the floor, carrying him with it. Joe looked up to see another stone disc sliding into place above him. The same blue lights illuminated the lift shaft, becoming a single cerulean blur as his descent quickened. Suddenly, the bedrock and lights were gone, and Joe felt as if he had been dropped into a void. His heart pounded against his chest. Sweat ran into his eyes. He waited for the disc to cast him into the darkness. Eventually, once his eyes grew accustomed to the weak light, he was able to make out walls. Not near, like the bedrock, but in the distance. They looked like they were perforated by giant circular passages, the scale of which made him shudder. Edging closer to the rim of the lift, Joe was dealt a nauseating bout of vertigo. Far below him, awash with artificial light, was an entire city. "Joe!" Sam called. He was well beyond worried. Guilt was ravaging him now. He could hear Veronique and Fedor's calls growing fainter with every step. So far, all he had found were colourful frogs, fat spiders, and a millipede sporting a ridiculous number of legs. There were also several foul-smelling flowers that resembled Lenalia far too closely for his liking. It was not surprising that he did not notice the long, sinuous coils of the anaconda as it unwound itself from the branch above his head. It lowered its triangular head toward the boy. Unblinking eyes regarded its prey, forked tongue flickering. It struck Sam high on the thigh, and he gasped, looking down in confusion, then let out a scream as he saw the gaping jaws of a giant snake attached to his leg. He continued screaming as the rest of the snake coiled itself around him. "Sam?" Fedor turned. He retraced his steps, following the meticulous line of broken stems and branches. "Sam?" "Fedor?" He heard Veronique nearby. "What's wrong? Was that Sam?" "I think so." The screaming started. Fedor sprang forward. "This way." Sam clawed at the serpent's face as its coils squeezed tighter. "Ah!" he screamed, waves of pain rushing through his body. He beat at the giant flat head, trying to push his fingers into eyes that were now firmly shut. Fedor burst from the jungle and stopped dead in his tracks. "What's going on?" Veronique's question died on her lips. "Do something!" She pushed Fedor towards the intertwined bodies. Fedor looked around, found a dead branch, and lifted it in both hands. "Hit it!" The knot of coils appeared to have no end nor weakness. "Where?" "Who cares? Just hit it!" Fedor swung the branch with all his might. Sam screamed again as the snake sank its fangs further into its thigh. "Don't!" he managed to breathe. The coils had almost reached his chest. "We have to do something!" Fedor looked around helpless. He spied a short, sharp stick and picked it up, sinking it into the snake. Again, the serpent bored into Sam and thrashed its tail. "Fedor!" Veronique shouted. "Look!" Sam was vaguely aware of his friend dropping the weapon. Their voices became distant, and his vision began to swim. The pressure around his torso had reached bone-crushing intensity, and he could no longer breathe. Too late. He thought about the flute in his pocket. He would not have had the breath to blow it, were it already glued to his lips. This was it. He'd failed. Everyone. There was a cracking noise and vicious pain. Darkness crept into the corner of his vision, the world becoming a quiet, agonizing blur. Sam's last conscious thought was of his beloved Sophie. "We'll be together soon." The disc settled on the cavern floor, without so much as a bump. Still seated, cross-legged and wide-eyed in the center, Joe looked around, a bout of nervous laughter brewing in his chest. The cavern was lit by an eerie radiance, and the size of it was wondrous enough, but the city sprawled across its base was the true marvel. A giant pyramid, adorned with massive sculptures, stood at the far end of a wide avenue, flanked by symmetrical rows of dwellings. Other roads ran across the area in front of the pyramid in a neat grid. Joe heard a dim roar drift across the silent suburbs to his right, and could see a long shimmering waterfall plummeting into a lake feeding the series of aqueducts that wound through the sleeping city. But the city's architecture and sophistication didn't make sense to him. Its sculptured facades, contoured columns and tiled roofs were Greco-Roman, whilst the temples and statues appeared to be Inca or Mayan. The pyramid was a mix of both Egyptian and Aztec design. Lampposts lined the empty cobbled avenues. And why was it so quiet? Joe's mind buzzed with questions as he observed the metropolis. Market squares, hungry for busy crowds, and traders' stalls stood empty, fountains and bathing pools, amphitheatres and temples all silent stages. How did it come to be buried or built beneath a hidden valley in the Amazon? It's unbelievable, he breathed. Isn't it just? Came an unexpected reply. Joe almost jumped out of his skin when a dark wraith of a man melted from the doorway of the nearest building and approached him. "Who the hell are you?" cried the startled youngster, edging away. "I might ask you the same question," the stranger replied. "But I know who you are. Giuseppe, last of your line. What I will ask is how you found your way here." Joe could now make out the man's features in the dim light. He was tall and lean, and moved with an unnerving grace. His eyes held the boy in a hard, relentless gaze. "It was quite by accident, I assure you," Joe laughed nervously. "My friends and I, this tree, you see, I leant against it, and there was this doorway with a staircase, then a strange room that wouldn't shut up." The man drew closer. Joe's laughter died, and he retreated. "Who are you? Where am I?" The man paused. "You have entered Udias el Sumanatro, the city of eternal night. Who I am is not important, and this place does not exist. But don't worry, for soon you will remember nothing." Now, within reach of the boy, the man suddenly struck Joe's temple with enough force to knock him out. Joe's eyes glazed over and rolled back. "Oh, come on," Bade muttered in disgust, as he caught the boy in his arms, noticing a nasty swelling already forming on his temple as he slung him over his shoulder. "I barely touched you." Gazing out over the city whose existence he had helped protect for thousands of years, he patted his inert cargo. Some secrets must remain hidden, no matter the cost, even if this one technically belongs to you. Sam awoke from a nightmare. Everything was quiet, peaceful. He sighed and began to roll over, relishing the prospect of a long lie-in. So was not at all ready for the hot pain that exploded through his leg in waves of agony. He cried out and felt a firm hand on his shoulder, easing him down. "Gently, Sam," a voice soothed him. "You're safe now." His head flopped back onto his sweat-drenched pillow. Cold reptilian eyes, endless suffocating coils tightening around him. "Oh my God!" "Easy, Sam." The voice belonged to the monk. "The snake's gone. You're safe." He was on a bed, in a tidy room with white walls and a bright ceiling. A robot hovered at the monk's shoulder. "You're in medical. Luckily, Miguel's team had the facilities for me to treat you." The robot made a small sound, and the monk rolled his eyes. "Sorry, where we could treat you." Sam swallowed. His throat was dry and raw. Jensi lifted a mug of ice chips. "Suck these." What happened?" Sam asked, after a few fitful attempts to speak. "How long have I—" 3 days. The monk shifted in his seat. "Fedor and Veronique saved you. Were it not for their quick thinking—" His face was pale and drawn. "8 of your ribs were shattered, and several had punctured your lungs. Florence," he indicated the attentive medical robot, "used nanites to rebuild the bone and tissue. It was the only way to save you. It was touch and go, but you should be back to full strength in no time." Sam examined his strapped chest. His thigh was so heavily bandaged. "How did they kill the snake?" "They didn't." Sam looked up. "I'll let Fedor explain. I wouldn't want to steal his thunder. Now that you're awake and Joe has been discharged, I could do with some rest myself." Sam felt embarrassed. He'd forgotten all about his friend. "Joe's safe. Where was he? What happened?" "He fell, or so we think. Miguel had the garden robots scour the jungle after his tracker nodes failed to pinpoint him. They found him unconscious in the branches below a lookout post, with a nasty bump on his head. Can't remember how he got there, but it seems obvious. He was firing a never-ending barrage of questions at me this morning, so he's clearly himself again. Sam managed a weak smile. I'm glad he's safe. I should have never let him go last. I've let everyone down. Jensi shook his head. Rubbish. It wasn't your fault. Joe needs to find strength in himself, not others. We've all seen how much you try to look after him. After all of them. But you can't always protect everyone. You shouldn't put that responsibility on yourself. Sam grunted, staring at the ceiling. Where are they now? Joe and Veronique have gone home. We brought the course break forward. Fedor asked to stay, and I thought you could use the company. There was a tap at the door. Speak of the devil? The tall boy poked his head around it. Awake? Yes, the monk said. Come on in. Slacker, Fedor greeted him, closing the door. Sam smiled weakly. Dustbin. Jensi rose and stretched. I'll leave you to catch up. 10 minutes, Fedor. He needs his rest. Okay. Sam turned to regard his friend. Thank you. We're even now, Fedor shrugged. Besides, the parrot saved you. I just helped. Really? How? He used a heavy Russian accent. Well, we heard you screaming like little girl. Veronique spotted some Lunalia, and we managed to sedate your playmate and pull you apart. Fedor's mask was slipping. The country bumpkin, all brawn, no brain facade he tried so hard to maintain, was all for show. Now, however, was not the time to tug at it. Sam drew a deep breath, but the pain in his chest caused him to cough in gurgled agony. Florence buzzed over. That's enough. You out. And you? She glared down at her charge. It's time for your medication. Okay. Sam winced, closing his eyes. Fedor rose and made his way to the door, admiring a brightly coloured pot plant. Don't spend all weekend lazing around, he called over his shoulder. But Sam was already asleep. From a workshop, hidden deep within a secluded corner of the gardens, Eugene Gnomeholt listened to the exchange with great interest, courtesy of the brightly coloured pot plant near the door. Microflowers were, without doubt, one of his finest creations. Organic carbosilicon flora, able to relay sights and sounds indistinguishable from normal blooms, had revolutionized covert surveillance. Easily hidden and needing no electricity or mechanics, his creations could interface with the Earthsong network from anywhere in the world. He was proud of all his work. The infamous Sleeping Beauty Rose, the Tengar sterility constructs. Eugene had weaponized Lunalia and created paralysis pollen. The plant kingdom offered a wealth of unimaginable diversity that, in the right hands, hands with green fingers, could yield any number of amazing hybrids. Eugene loved his work, but hated the moniker it had earned him. Gene Gnome. He knew where it had originated. Creed. Dominic Creed, the loud, brash American geneticist, who thought his clumsy, barbaric animal mods were superior, pushing true delicate genius into the shade. Eugene had tried the Firefly's Fingers mod. Once. It was clearly a poor plagiarism of his Firefly fern, though he hated to admit that Creed's eagle eyes seemed to be a stroke of genius, as was his success in isolating the hibernation gene from the woolly bear caterpillar, finally making suspended animation possible, not to mention his use of shark DNA to create passive echolocation, a sixth sense for detecting objects without sight or sound. Still, the man wasn't civil. There was no need for name-calling. The centrifuge, besides Eugene, whirled to a halt with a click, ending his period of reflection. Swivelling round on his stool, feet far from the floor, he ceased his eavesdropping and left the patient to his recuperation. Pushing his octagonal glasses up, Eugene returned to the task in hand.